Bridget was kicking in doors on SWAT. She was working undercover in narcotics. And then she did something most people may not have seen coming. She became a lawyer, not to get away from law enforcement, to fight for it. And if you wear a badge or ever did, you need to hear this conversation. Bridget, welcome to the Find Me podcast.
Thank you very much. That was an excellent intro. Thank you. I loved it.
Yes. So here's why I want people to understand really why I wanted you to join us on the show. I am a United States Marine Corps veteran. I'm also a law enforcement and SWAT veteran like yourself. I've been able to work counterterrorism, trafficking investigations, pretty much on the tactical side. But the one thing that nobody really prepares you for is what happens when the institution that you bleed for just turns on you, or in some cases, flat out fails you. I've had that personally happen to myself, and I've seen it happen to numerous of my fellow officers at the time. So that's sort of what I want to talk about today.
Yeah, perfect.
Now, before we do get too far into our conversation, whenever we have a guest join like yourself, we'd like to reach out to our community and see if they have any questions. So if you're up for it, we have a question that was submitted from Amanda, who's in North Carolina. Is that okay?
Absolutely. Shoot.
What's the one thing you wish someone had told you before you put on that badge for the first time?
Oh, gosh. The hard part with that is that you just can't tell people something if they haven't done it yet. You can't ever really get anybody to, and particularly with law enforcement, or firefighter, any first responder, law enforcement, firefighter, EMT, corrections, maybe even the probation officers. Until you do it, you just don't have any idea. And having said that, so again, and that's, I guess, very specific to like what the job is, the substance of what you're going to do, the people you're going to interact, the evil, the death, the mayhem, the stink, the filth, in the narcotics unit and digging through people's trash so I could find enough information to get a search warrant, and the maggots and just all the things. But if you set that aside, because I say all the time, you can't change what the job is, but what you can change is the only thing you can control is you. I've done yoga for years. I've done multiple different yoga certifications. And after 20 years of doing yoga, it finally kind of hit me. And whether you think people think this is hippy dippy or not, I don't care, is that the only thing you can control is yourself. And that would have been that from the get-go. If I could have mentored me, as I would have said, look, you cannot control what the others around you are going to think. And me at 24 would have thought, yes, I can. I'm going to work hard and I'm going to show them that I can do it. But you just can't. It's just not how it works. No matter how hard you work, no matter how much of yourself you give, ultimately the value on that is based upon what you think and your internal barometer. But that's really, really hard. Everybody wants to know that they're doing a good job. Everybody would like to be appreciated in your efforts. And what I would have told myself is, look, this is going to suck. And people are probably not going to appreciate your efforts, but you can do this. Just stay steady, because the sun will always come up tomorrow. And then to have somebody, do that check-in. Hey, how sucky is it right now? Because you still have this. What do you need to do to make sure you're okay? Because if you're your best version, then you're the best version. And so the ripple effects of that are great. So, and I don't know if that sounds too generic, but one is to say, look, internally, this is going to suck. And your work still matters. And if this is what you want to do, you can do it. But then not just that would be like, and then to have somebody to like check in and listen after that. Because that's that one thing. It's like, you can't just brush your teeth one time in your life and be done. And I give that analogy all the time. It's something you have to do all the time. And I definitely wish it's not so much about you're tough, you can do this. You're strong enough for SWAT. Yes, you can go buy crack for a living. It's not about what the job was. It was more of how do you get through the job from that aspect.
A mission with purpose to find the missing using the power of social networking and cutting-edge technology. We're military veterans, technologists, scuba divers, and relentless seekers. From deep forests to sunken vehicles, from silence to signal, every clue matters. If you've ever felt the call to stand for something greater, this is your moment. This is the Find Me Project.
Yeah, no, I completely resonate with everything that you just said. It's two things I want to ask you on. When I find, when I think about this, it's kind of funny. But before I ask, so you talk about going through the trash. I would imagine, especially what you did. Did you guys often do trash pools? Is what we called them. Trash dumps.
Trash
God.
pools. Yes, and
Yeah.
for a little while, I had another female on the narcotics unit with me, and of course, we were always partnered together. And she and I were really close, and still close. I mean, we haven't worked together now for over 20 years. And she's in Hawaii, darn it. Anyway, she had a really bad gag reflex. And I would joke with her every once in a while, like I'd be pulling something out in the meat in summertime in Florida, and it just gross.
Oh.
And I would go, the pretend gag, and she would, Bridget, don't. And then she would ultimately not be able to stop herself and then throw up. And not always, I'm not saying I ultimately forced her to throw up, but it was, and that's the thing, when you're in those worlds, you end up laughing about some of the filthiest, nastiest things. And, but yeah, it was nasty.
Yeah. I remember, there was a human and sex trafficking house is what I'm going to call it, that we were trying to take down, but we couldn't get anything on this guy. And we ended up dressing as the local trash folks, went out, did a trash pull. To your point though, I remember we went to where the police vehicles are maintained. And, we went in that little storage facility and dumped all the trash out. And I remember thinking, what am I doing with my life? Because the things that you were finding in that, I just thought, this is unbelievable.
You can find out anything and everything and more than you'd ever want to know from somebody's trash.
100%. Yeah. And that was actually the gateway to end up taking this person down, which did horrific things to people. When you think back to your past life, you talked about buying crack, when you were an undercover officer. When you think the life you live today, whether you're at the grocery store or maybe you're in line, I don't know if you have children, but if you're in line at the school PTA, how often do you think back and think, these people around me have no idea? And you kind of go back to that memory of, they have no idea that I used to buy crack. I used to, fill in the blank. Do you have that thought?
A lot and often. And I do have 3 kids, two girls are in high school. Well, first I like 9th and 10th grade. And then my son is in elementary school. So, I all the time. And what I know, because I'm 51 years old now, I'm not afraid to say it, is that people they just don't know what they don't know. And you're just so oblivious. And then harkening back, going back to your first question is, you just can't tell. I just don't know if there's a way to get really people to understand what they don't know, and how it's really a rock's throw from anybody at any point, in terms of whether you are a block away from somebody somewhere really unsafe and you have no idea, or a block away from some house where there's something really bad going on inside and you don't know, or maybe that, house down the street that nobody's been taken care of and the grass is getting too high. Like, is it a grow house inside now? Are they growing? And back when I was a cop, marijuana was a much bigger deal, and it still is in some places and may or may not be legal. But the point is, you just really have no idea what people are going through. What you feel like you're safe when you're in your bubble, but obviously as cops, you have gone into some of the best neighborhoods and the worst things happen. And it can happen of a blink of an eye. And I think it's those kind of things that, it doesn't make me a cynic, but I also do a lot of work to not be a cynic. And I think that does require a lot of proactive effort, for all humans for the most part. But yeah, I think all the time people will say stuff and yesterday I thought, the problems you think you have and that are really not problems.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's, yeah, I agree with that. It's, when I think back, even with my time in the Marines, when I went over to war, I look at my time in law enforcement and my God, the amount of evil, like the best way that I describe it to people when I talk about it is I feel like that evil, like it like leached off of the people and it would almost, it would try to attach onto you. It's pure evil and disgusting. Yeah.
I used to say, well, part of the reason I left law enforcement is I remember saying to somebody one time, like, people do the stupidest things. And as supervisors, and this is to all supervisors, I don't think enough people in supervisor or leadership roles get enough leadership training to give them the tools and coaching to be their best selves in that way. But certainly in law enforcement is, I told my dad one time, I was like, I have to leave before I become stupid through osmosis, because I just am afraid it's going to rub off. And it's that same concept though of, and that's where I think the cynicism can come in, is like, you're just constantly rubbing elbows with hate and anger and filth and problems and just bad things. And yeah, it does rub off. And that's why I think that, yes, that's why there is such a mental health problem in these professions, because it's nobody outside of the first responder world, for the most part, is encountering that kind of stuff on such a regular basis. And it does affect you 100% of the time.
100% it does. Yeah. You talked about how you're still trying to work through it. Years ago, I think it was like in the 2016 timeframe, it was the first time in my life I had to sit down and actually truly devote time to work through it. Otherwise, I very well probably would have became a statistic. So, yeah. Well, let's go ahead and start by talking about your journey. So if you're okay with it, I'd like you to take me back to the very beginning and describe what pulled you into law enforcement in the first place.
It's going to sound, so I had this really bad boyfriend in high school who made me feel stupid, or tried to pretend like he was so much smarter than me. And I joke, but I do think, so I moved around a lot growing up, during the elementary years, middle school years, and girls are mean and they're awful and making friends is hard. And I mean, sometimes we were in a place for 1 year or less a year. And then you move and you start doing that. And then I moved back to Louisiana. I'm originally from Louisiana. We moved back. I was in high school. Girls are awful. This guy, I don't know why he decided that I needed to be his girlfriend, because everybody knew he was a player. Even me. And even though I decided to date him, that was another session with a therapist many years later. But ultimately, I think it's a culmination of those things, of me thinking, no, but wanting to be tough, not wanting to let people hurt my feelings. This high school boyfriend kind of said, like, basically, like, you're not ever calling me stupid, but just always like, I'm smarter than you, I'm better than you. And then when I went to college and got away from all that, still just kind of always had, I think I've always kind of had I don't have to be on the same path as everybody, just because I feel like I wasn't necessarily growing up, because just moving around a lot. I know tons of people that never moved. They've had the same friends since they were in kindergarten. Like, I don't even know what that would be like, the number of houses I've lived in. And no, my dad was not in the military, but that's another story. So when it came time to graduate from college, that's also a story. I ended up graduating in environmental horticulture. I'll spare you that long story. Plants. And I realized I don't want to do that for the rest of my life. And nobody in my family's ever been in law enforcement. So that was not the motivator. Didn't have a big military background either. I worked out a lot at the time, and part of the motivation was, well, I don't know if I'll be motivated forever to be fit. And so maybe if I find a job that requires me to be fit. So something like the military. So came up with law enforcement. And then also, I've very much my whole life been a very, whether you call it goody two shoes or not, as I believe in the rule of law. I believe in right and wrong. I believe for the most part, that's very black and white. Although having been in the narcotics unit, like there's some gray. Yes, you committed a crime, but help me find the bigger criminal. And so was excited about choosing something where I could contribute to society, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, thinking I could benefit, I could, help society be a better place. Wanting to do my part to with the rule of law and consequences and keeping everybody safe. And then thinking, great. And then in the process, I'll have a job that requires me to be fit and makes me work out. Well, then I became a cop. and quickly realized you do not need to be fit. Yes, there are physical standards, but they're a joke, which is a giant crying shame, because why would you want to be a cop that's significantly unhealthy and then die? Or as a community, you should be holding these people up to a higher standards and insisting on it, because if you need somebody to come chase and save you, like, you want them to be able to actually chase someone and save you. So that ultimately is what led me to, I thought I wanted to do federal law enforcement, which is why I went local so I could get there. When I was on the narcotics unit, I ended up working with a lot of other types of federal investigators, which there are hundreds of different federal agencies that have their own law enforcement arm. And then also getting on the SWAT team, because obviously that was a very physical challenge, and I absolutely loved that aspect of it. And then certainly we can talk about it later, but I was the only female member they had on SWAT team. They've never had one since. We could have a whole conversation around, do I even think, is there a place for women on units like that? Because it's apples and oranges. Like, I'll never be an apple and they'll never be an orange. It is what it is. But ultimately, I was a dork, and I wanted to uphold the Constitution, and I wanted to be fit. So that's how I landed in law enforcement.
Wow. Yeah. I definitely want to talk about your time in SWAT, because you're right. You're certainly a unicorn. I think what you did, a woman on the SWAT team, you're very much an A-type person. You have an A-type personality, but that's a powerful thing. There could be a lot of girls. We have a lot of teenagers that watch this show as well.
Great.
And they very well may hear what you have to say, and it could change their life. So I certainly want to circle back to that. But talking about how you are an A-type personality, you go into law enforcement. When you think back to your childhood, what did your childhood look like? And let me tell you, the reason why I'm asking that is because I think to go into law enforcement, the military, or some of the other like fields, it's very much an A-type person. And when you look at the type of people that are in those roles, I don't want to just say blanketed law enforcement, but more so the tip of the spear, SWAT, and some of the other areas, you see a similar pattern. So what was your childhood like?
Well, I would say there's nothing really hard about it, other than the fact that my parents got divorced young, and then we started moving around with my mom and her husband. So I moved 2nd grade, 3rd grade, 4th grade, 7th grade. And I didn't say that was hard at the time. I didn't know any different. So we just moved. Certainly my dad was very unhappy about it. He tried to get us back and all these child custody things. But still, I had 2 parents that loved me. We lived in a good, a safe, food, clothing, shelter. Those were never an issue. We never were hungry. We were safe. We went to good schools, and my mom was a teacher, and my dad was a pharmacist, and we still saw my dad every chance we could get, and certainly, not hard, so to speak. Certainly, I said earlier, the moving around and developing as a youngster and making friends, and how kids can be mean and all that. Although you can still find mean kids whether you're moving or not. I think there is nature versus nurture. There's innate qualities people have, and then can you teach those or can you not? People say, "Oh, I don't know how you do that," or "How did you do it?" And I'm like, I just did. I don't know. Like, not doing. Like, I decided I want to try out for SWAT. To me, like, it's not the same thing, but like, okay, I'm going to run a marathon. Well, I'm going to really think about that. And if I decide I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. Like, it's going to be hard, or maybe something happens and I got to postpone. And I wouldn't even tell somebody. I've only done 2 marathons, by the way. And I decided I'll just hang that hat up on a shelf because I don't want to do another one. But I remember when I decided to do it, I didn't say anything to anybody until I was sure I was going to do it, because I don't want to say, "Oh, I changed my mind. I didn't want to do that." Or when I left the sheriff's office and decided I was going to go to law school, like, I really decided that's what I was going to do before I said, number 1, I'm leaving, which I was really unhappy about. But number 2, and I'm going to go to law school, and that's going to really suck, because it does bad. And then, or even when I'm going to leave a law firm life where I'm making decent money, like I call it the golden handcuffs, to quit that and start my own thing, because I really believed that I could do something that could help. And so I think some of that's just nature. Certainly growing up in just being on my own. And I have my second daughter is a little bit more like that, where if she doesn't have anything to do, she'll just go find something to do. She'll create something. And I have always been I don't know, but I'll figure it out. Like, what are you going to do? I don't know, but I'll figure it out. And, a big problem yesterday, one of my attorneys told me yesterday she's leaving. And oh crap, she's been with me the longest. And, I was really hoping to make her like a team lead later. And then tomorrow really, yesterday really sucked. But today I woke up and I'm like, okay, I'll figure it out. You can just put one foot in front of the other. And I've even had my own siblings over time say, I just am not like you, Bridget. And I'm like, it's not a magic pill. Like, I don't have a magic power. It's just that if you want to do something, you can do it. It does not mean that it's going to be easy. And I think that's where the hard never scared me. The hard never turned me away. And I think also if you go move, we're going to move. Well, I can't prevent my parents from moving, and we're going to start over again. I mean, I remember one time we moved before third grade was even over. We moved at the beginning of third grade. We moved before third grade was over. Yes, I was really young, but I can remember distinctly hearing two teachers just outside the doorway say, what kind of mother would move a child with the school year's not even over yet? And then I realized she was talking about me and my mom. And I was like, whoa, I remember thinking, you don't know me. But then it's like, okay, what's hard? But then what? You can't, it's like being in law enforcement. You can't change the fact that you're going to have to pull trash or see dead people or see horrible, horrific scenes. Or I've seen the brain matter of a 2-year-old when the adults all passed out and the kid found the gun and he died. And it was horrible. And I'll never forget the shrieks of the mother, like those, but I can't do anything about that. So then what? What do you want to do? Yeah. Put one foot in front of the other. You want to figure it out. I want to be on SWAT team. Okay. What does that mean? I knew that I would have every single eye on me all the time. I did it anyway. And I think it's a decision. And I think a lot of people are like, well, I just can't do it. And yes, you can. Yes, you can.
100%. I mean, what you're describing is resiliency in its greatest form. I absolutely agree, in line with that, because I enjoy every day pushing limitations, finding out what I'm capable of. But that's a very rare thing nowadays. You don't necessarily see as many people that are willing to do that. They'd rather just have everything handed to them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I would imagine, so fast forward, you get into law enforcement. From what I've seen, there's typically a grace period before you can go to a specialized unit, narcotics or SWAT. Is that true?
Yes. And I did get mine really quick. And I'm not necessarily advocating for anybody else to do it that way, because it does make it harder. It does make the scrutiny lens even more broad and the spotlight brighter on you. I've even had somebody very recently, this guy, I know him, and this guy has this radio show, and we sent him an email saying, hey, would love to be it's a panel discussion. And I certainly think I like to contribute from a legal standpoint, whatever the issues are, or from a legal standpoint, how do the issues I see affect mental health? Not necessarily saying, I'm not going to say, go file a lawsuit, here's what you can say. I say, rather, let me tell you how facing these issues does impact officers from a mental health perspective and how I see it and how that comes up in my practice. Well, he responded back to me saying, I don't know why you would ever think that you're qualified to be on my show. Even though you've been an attorney for 18 years, that's not long enough for you to be have a credible opinion. And said, I don't even believe you on your law enforcement experience, because there's no way you could have done that many things in the amount of time that you were in law enforcement. And, I had to let that one go for a little bit. And I'm certainly not going to get a back and forth with him. But the point of that being, that whole conversation is, yes, it still pisses me off because I still bring it up every once in a while. I'm working on letting it go. But I let it go to the extent that I did not lash out at him the way I would, who do you think you are? And blah, blah, blah. But it comes to what your question is. Did the fact that I got those things so fast, was there a requirement? Yes, I think it was you had to be at least a year on to get into the narcotics unit. Well, I think narcotics is a little bit different because there's some value in bringing somebody in an undercover role that the community hasn't seen yet. And also they didn't have a female on the narcotics unit at the time. So, value in both senses, in both aspects. And then the SWAT team, I really don't remember, but I'm sure, I guarantee you they didn't break a rule for me.
Yeah.
Nope.
No,
If
yeah.
it was probably at least a year on. I was like a year and 2 months on when they posted it. Or maybe I think my year was September. I think I tried out in November or so, and then they put me on the team in January. So technically, by the letter, the rule of law, or by the policy, I had been on long enough.
Yeah.
And honestly, I can see, like, if somebody's ready and they're physically capable, and you're going to teach them the tactics, then let them be on. But then the converse to that is, sometimes getting a lot more experience really does come into play. And
Yeah.
also a caveat to that is they never let me do anything. So it's not like I was in a position that I didn't have enough experience in law enforcement to adequately, and in a spur of a moment, like in a second, decide what to do, because they never let me do anything. That was always the equipment or the van or the whatever. But that's just a side effect of being a female in SWAT. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think those people you're talking about, the guy that was giving you negative feedback is what I'll call it. I mean, typically from what I've seen, he's probably still living in his mom's basement. He's very jealous. Yeah, he probably has some, some issues he's dealing with.
I've talked with my therapist long enough to know that I'm not responsible for you. And I'm also a big fan of therapy, by the way. So
we'll talk a little bit about that in a second. So I don't want to spend too long here, because I do have some good questions that I think, if there's any law enforcement officers that are going to listen to this, that they're going to want to hear. But your first call as a law enforcement officer, if you think back to your very first one, what was it?
I mean, I tell people this story all the time. So, you're in training, you go through the FTO program, and usually it's about 3 months, 1 month of following, not doing anything, 1 month of pseudo you versus the FTO, and then the third month of you're on your own and they're watching and giving you feedback. So in my agency, once you're off, you're on your car by yourself. We didn't have partners. So the University of Florida, Gainesville sits in Alachua County. So just outside of Gainesville, it's pretty rural. And I mean, certainly over the last 20 years since I left, it's grown, but still you'd be in zones by yourself out at midnight, and there's not even a street light on it. Pitch black in the country. Anyway. So first day, January 1st, on my own, in my patrol car by myself, and I was on the 3P to 3A shift, which I was so excited about. That's like, something's happening the whole time you're working, pretty much. And I was so excited about it. First call, 10-8. I'm ready to go in my zone by myself. Shots fired into an occupied home, shooters on scene, and I was less than 5 minutes away.
Right on.
And I'm really good with direction. So I turned around and I was thinking, oh my gosh. And we had all gone 10-8, which in the code meant like we all had just gone active on shift. And so I knew there was a lot of people, even if they weren't in my zone, they weren't that far from the sheriff's office. So they were going to turn around and head my way. So even in the less than 5, and maybe it was 3 minutes away, it still gives me the chills. In the 3 minutes it took me to get there, the shooter was gone and nobody was injured. Thank goodness. But that was a serious pucker moment. And I've never, ever forgotten any aspect of that moment.
I bet. Yeah. It was I certainly did not have my first call was nowhere near that. It was a suspicious death. Turned out to be natural causes, but I had to sit, because when you're the new guy, you get the crap duties.
Oh yeah.
I had to sit and provide security in the room with this person who had been passed away for days.
Ew.
And the coroner got there, and of course I'm the lowest man on the totem pole, so I have to help. I have to help, and it was the first time I ever experienced, because he had been laying in this position.
Yeah, and that happened to me too.
Yes, his bone. My first call, and his femur's like cracking, and I thought, oh my God.
I had one of those too, where he'd been there for, I want to say 2 weeks, and I thought he was a black guy, but he'd just been there so long that his skin had turned because he was a white guy. And I thought he was obese, but no, it's because if you sit there for 2 weeks, your body bloats. And here's for anyone that doesn't know, if you puncture the skin, everything starts to come out, which means that when you got to pick this thing up, It was. I remember I left that and I called my sergeant. I said, I have to go change.
Yep.
And from that day forward, I always had a second uniform in my car.
Same. Yeah. That's terrible.
Yep.
Okay, back on track. So you let's get into SWAT. As you're getting ready to go to SWAT school, did you guys actually have your own internal SWAT school?
We didn't have you get started and go do this thing for 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks before you can go, to SWAT. We weren't a full-time SWAT team. We were what you call a call-out team. So if something happened, it's back in the day of pagers. I don't know how they do it now. If something happened, they would, our pagers would go off. I definitely had that happen in the middle of the night. We'd go out as a hostage situation or active shooter or something. And then we would all show up and get our stuff and go. Or if I definitely was the FNG and would go to the sheriff's office, get the van and take that. Whereas some of the guys would just go 10-8 from the house and go to the scene and collect it, show up where we ever have to need to plan or whatever. But we did also do a lot of training. So my sheriff's office was great. We did a lot of training. We had great equipment. We had a great sheriff. I think they still are that way. And then on top of that, we would do SWAT training. I think it was at least once a month. And then once a year, we would do a full week training at Camp Blanding, which is I think it's an Army Reserve base. I mean, I'm sure Army uses it for all kind of stuff, but it was probably 40 minutes outside of Gainesville. And we would go stay on base, and which I had to drive my RV there because I was the only girl. So I had to have my own barracks. And I think that was a week. And then, we do other things like when there would be full sheriff's office trainings where everybody had to go get certified on school shooting situations or whatever, we would be the ones doing the training or being the actors or whatever. So we got a lot of training, which that's one of the things I loved the most about it. We also competed in 2 SWAT competitions. They still do. SWAT will end up international in Orlando. I was on the competition team twice, and that was also, so then on top of all that, 4 days a week, we would train. And I always say that's like the closest I ever got to being a paid athlete. But at the time I was thinking I was making $30,000 a year. So I was a paid athlete making a whole whopping $30K. So it's a long way of answering your question. We didn't have like a SWAT school to start, but we would get a lot of training.
Okay. Well, the reason I ask is, so as you're getting ready to enter into the SWAT world, how did it feel knowing that you were potentially the only woman that had gone as far as you were going to go, or if you made it, you would be the first woman on the team? How did that feel?
So the tryout, we started before the sun came up. The first thing was a run. I can't remember how far. It wasn't that far. And I knew I could run, but certainly part of me was like, is this going to be like the stuff you see on TV where they take off at a breakneck pace and then people are dropping off like flies, throwing up or whatever? But really, like, I did the run and it was fine. And then I think we ran back. I don't remember. And then, and one of the things, we drove somewhere else and did, it's funny, I can't remember all of it, but I know we had rappel. We had to do shooting, and I don't think that was on paper targets. Maybe it was like, I can't remember if it was a moving target or if it was the plate you knocked down. I can't remember. And I'm kind of confusing this with the SWAT competition, but rappelling, shooting, running. An obstacle course where we had to drag a dummy. Probably 170 pound. I think that's the standard, like 170 for a dummy. And I had to drag it and get it into the SWAT van, which I did, just like everybody else. And then certainly my carry was maybe different, but I got that sucker in the van. I actually drug him by his feet because you can dig your fingers into the caps of the dummy's feet. And I was like, I don't think my fingers are ever going to unfold, but by God, I did it. And then it culminated at the end of the day with an interview with, I think, the majority, or if not the whole team, circled around you, firing questions at you. I knew, okay, this is it. Like, I knew all eyes were on me, and my maiden name is Baragona. And the SWAT captain at the time said, before we even stood, I'm in the line, it's big pitch black. And of course the SWAT commander had to say, Baragona, you're making history. And I was like, God, why did you do that? And then we were off, and, I finished the day, and just like everybody else did.
Good for you. Did your team have a selection process?
Yes. And Okay, so like when we did the run, it was the whole team and the candidates. And I remember, I don't think there were more people trying out than they had spots for, but I don't remember. Or there were 3 spots and there were 5 people or something like that. And so there were open spots, and I know a guy made it and a guy made it, and I knew I should be next. And so I really can't remember if I was third on the list, but there was no list. Nobody ever told us or showed us or gave rankings or anything. Or if I just knew, well, I'm the last one. There's 1 spot left and I'm the last one. Well, certainly I found out much later from my SWAT commander that the only reason I was on the team was because the captain made him put me on the team, because I had passed everything everybody else had passed and there was no reason for me to not make it. But he told me that 3 times. The only reason you're on this team is because the captain of patrol made me put you on. So, yeah, tryout was in November, and I think I made the team in January.
Good deal. Yeah, I know. We had to go to a formal SWAT school, very, very paramilitary, and then you had to be voted on. Every single active team member had to vote. If anybody said no, you were not coming on the team. So it was a unique process, which I can see why that exists, I guess. So,
but also can make it very political, which would be kind of crappy.
100%. Yeah, this is actually a question that I didn't have planned to ask you, but I've never thought about this, and I'm actually interested to see your thought as a woman. So again, I never served with a woman on the SWAT team, but I would go through certain training, or if we were doing an operation, there would absolutely be women who were officers, detectives, whatever, on, as part of it. And sometimes what you would see is that you have 30 men and 1 woman. And it becomes a situation, at least I've always seen, where those men try to do everything possible to get that woman. As a woman, did you feel like that was happening? And what did it feel like or look like once you were on the SWAT team? Did you have any problems where men were coming up to you nonstop trying to get with you? Or was that not the case?
No, so not on my team. When you have a woman in the room, of a predominantly male-filled room, and it's in that type of militaristic or paramilitaristic environment, everybody's always hyper aware that the woman is there. And I naively just wanted to get to the point where it was just another person in the room. And I have since come to the conclusion, and still believe it, that I don't believe that's possible. I don't believe it's possible for any man, and I don't mean this in a stereotypical way. I just think it's the way that we're wired as human beings over millennia. That I don't think it's possible for any man in the room to forget the fact that there is a woman in the room. Now, I think you can have men who are very respectful of the woman's capabilities and abilities, but I don't think they'll ever actually forget, like, oh, it's a female, because again, it's just how you're wired over millions of years. And then there's the other side, which is that there's guys that are very aware that it's a woman in the room, and again, whether it's nature or nurture, they're just never going to think this person can do it. Never going to really include them in the way that you automatically include other people, the guys. When you're putting together an entry team, and we had team captains, and the team captains get to pick who their entry team's going to be. I was never I got to do it one time, and the guy that chose me to be on the entry team, he told me years later that he got like berated significantly for putting me on an entry team. And because of those innate just differences, again, apples versus oranges, one's not better than the other. They'll never be the same. I do think that makes it very difficult to really fully bring a woman onto a team. Now, depending on where you live and the size of your team and the different roles, if it's big enough, you can have, I do think that you could incorporate a female in a way that works better, versus my team, which was I think we had 20, 21, 22 members. And we were all operators. Like there was nobody on more of a surveillance, support. And not that I'm saying that's where women should be. And also, I will say, because of those differences, I think it's important for a female to really be eyes wide open on what are you really hoping to achieve out of this? Because if you really want to be one of the top operators, I would caution you, and to say whether you like what I say or not, that you're probably not going to be. And right or wrong, it's just the way it is. Now, is that a discriminatory thing? I'm an employment law attorney. Is it discriminatory? Are they treating you in a way that they're maybe, I don't know. But I'm telling you, you're walking into a room where your presence is always going to stand out. And you might be lucky enough to have somebody who recognizes your abilities. And because I could shoot and run as good as all the other guys, I was never going to be stronger than any of them. So, there's just certain inevitabilities that I think you really have to be aware of. And as a female, be very aware of and think a lot about, what do you want this to be? Because you're very likely going to be disappointed.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think back to, one of the largest environments where we had a female presence was in the intelligence space, where everything you just said always happened. I mean, you can't, we could never really separate. And I think it's just evolution. I mean, I think it's just what happens. But with that said, I want to be very clear. My stance is, if you can shoot, move, and communicate, there's no doubt in my mind, just looking at your background, hearing you talk, seeing you, that you would outperform some of the operators that I've known. If you can check the boxes, and if you're that 1%, to me, it don't matter, right? I mean, you're an operator, you're a fellow brother, sister. So, yeah, I appreciate you sharing that from a female perspective.
And the other thing I think it does come up, what I said earlier is, like, I'll find a way, and am I going to be the one that is going to use the battering ram and the 100-pound shield at the same time and do that in the way that one of my former Marine guys could do? No. But I will find a freaking way. Like, if it comes down to it, but I'm going to do it differently than you, and that doesn't make it bad. And I think also every team has, people have their strong suits and their weak, strong links and weak links. And so you put the people in the strong where they're strongest, and you put, my strong suit was not going to be the same thing as the former Marine guy. So I think, but I also think that takes a lot of bravery and strength from the standpoint of leadership. And even to the point of the leader needs to look in the mirror and see, where am I the problem in this? If I was not strong enough or fast enough, or any of those things you said, absolutely, you shouldn't be an operator. I am never suggesting anybody should be the token member of a SWAT team. Too many bad things can happen too fast. And you say, because you really are the tip of the spear. And so, but and this is the thing, one of the biggest failures in all leadership, even outside of law enforcement, is that leaders have to be capable of looking in the mirror and saying, but where could I do better? Because if something's making you, I made those people uncomfortable somehow, and they didn't like me because of that. Really, the question is, but why is this making you uncomfortable? Because that's your sticking point, not mine. And I also had a really good supervisor. Before I became a cop, I worked at this children's entertainment facility in Gainesville, the most amazing manager I've ever worked under, who taught this kind of stuff. And he would always say, one of the things I remember I got so mad at him when he said it is, like, you're responsible for the answer. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, well, you ask a question, I'm going to answer it. You can't get mad at me and you can't get mad at me for my answer. Like, you asked it. So you have to take responsibility for the answer. And so I think that's where you forcing people to say, like, forcing people to be okay with uncomfortable, and then figuring out, but why is this making me uncomfortable? And then saying, okay, but and taking responsibility for that. And that's what I think. Another thing is it's hard for people to do. It's hard to take responsibility. I mean, I'm married. I've been with my husband all together. I think we're at, what year is this? We're in like 21 years together. There's a lot of times where I am just mad at him. But even when I'm furious at him and he did something wrong, and I can think of a few examples clearly, I'm still going to say, but what could I have done differently? Because I'm not going to take responsibility for him being an ass. I don't know if this is G-rated. You can bleep me out.
No, it's the internet.
But
you can say whatever.
I do take responsibility for me. And so even when I get so mad at somebody doing something wrong, I'm going to look at it as, okay, I don't accept what you did, and you're a jerk, and I'm not excusing that. But I can only do me. So what could I do differently in that situation? How do I react to you being an ass? Like, I don't have to react to that. That guy's comment to me, totally attacking everything I've done in my professional life. Like, I don't take responsibility for you being an ass. And the only thing I can do differently is, how did the pitch go? Should I reword that? Like, I'm not gonna, and I don't mean like I'm gonna hide my things I've done in my career in case you judge me for it. Like, I don't care if you judge. I'm still going to be the best version of me. So I think that's a really long answer, but certainly it sucked. It was hard. It was a hard lesson to learn and go through. I mean, I was already choosing something really hard, and then it was a hard lesson. But I wouldn't give that up for anything.
Yeah. Well, clearly I could talk about this for hours. And like you said, this would be a separate episode in itself. I would really like to maybe at some point in the future explore your SWAT experience and undercover narcotics in greater detail.
Mm-hmm.
But what I do want to pivot to is talking about rights, retaliation, and the system.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to start off by talking about what officers don't know. What would you say are the most common workplace rights that first responders have no idea they're entitled to?
Well, one is you should complain. And when I mean complain, I mean, call it what you want, complaining, tattletaling, reporting, whatever it is. Nothing will start or change unless you report it. When I was going through my crap at the sheriff's office, people would come up to me all the time. Hey, keep your head up, or hey, keep your head down, or, whatever you want to say in that moment. I literally got to the point where I was like, if one more person comes in here and tells me to keep my head up, I'm going to kick them in the balls. Like, I was just like, thank you for I think you have good intentions. But then I was thinking, you obviously know about this. Do something about it. Tell all these guys around me to stop. You're being idiots. Take a look in the mirror. But what I will tell you is, and actually now being been an attorney for a real long time, is that's not how the system works, and that's not how the options available to you to fix it. That's not how those work. So first and foremost is you must report it, and you can do that in a way where you're not like burning the building down. And the other, so two things. So one is you must always report it. And that starts with keeping a timeline of things. If you get to the point where you start to think, I'm going to say when you, because unfortunately, if you're in this long, the job long enough, it's when, not if. When it gets to the point where you start to think, man, this doesn't seem right, you should already have been writing it down. So start writing it down, keep a timeline, dates, times, and name names. Because if you're saying, I'm treated differently than others, whatever, because I'm a female, because I'm Jewish, because I'm hurt, because I'm Black, because I'm Hispanic, whatever it is, you have to say, well, if it's because I'm a female, okay, well then how are the guys being treated? Well, they're not letting me go to training. Okay, well then who are they going to training? Who is going to training? And well, I wasn't picked chief. They picked somebody else. Okay, why? Because they said they never wanted to hire a Black guy. Like, okay, that's an important detail. And they hired a white guy. Those kind of things matter. Number two is you must know what your policies are. I can almost guarantee that everybody signed a document saying, I've received the policies. That means you're required to know them. So if you're thinking, man, this doesn't seem right, go find the policy and read what it says, because there's a chance they're violating policy. I certainly have had those instances where they come after somebody and they go about it completely wrong. There's procedural protections in a lot of ways, and more depending on what state you live in. But there are procedural protections, and you want to be held. You got to hold them to that. And sometimes, and I know people feel like it's always personal. Sometimes it's not personal. They just forgot, or they've just been doing it too long and they skipped a step and they didn't mean to. But you have to point that out, and you can't be afraid, oh, it'll get worse for me if I point it out. I don't care. I tell people all the time, you've already chosen hard. You chose this job. So I don't care if this part's hard. Now you got to protect yourself. And then the third one is when it comes to things like interviews. If you're in this paramilitaristic world, you know that if you're being called in for an interview, you don't have the option of saying no. You have to go, but you still have rights in that. In fact, I just posted a short video on this recently. They have to give you notice of what the investigation's about. A lot of times you have to sign off on that. Sometimes you don't, just depending on where you are. If they're using a video against you from body-worn camera, you have the right, and sometimes that's in your policies. Sometimes it's also in state law. Know what your state law says on that, and it's your responsibility to know that. You need to know that. If they're going to use a video against you, you have the right to review that video before they can ask you about it. You have the right to request the interview stop in order for you to look at the video. And if they don't, and it's kind of like fruit of the poisonous tree in a criminal case, anything that comes after that, they're not supposed to be able to use against you. So it's really up to you to protect yourself. But it starts with, you must know what your protections are. And certainly that's what we do, is we help people analyze it all and say, okay, but what are the policies? And we look at it and say, oh, well, they violated the policies. And sometimes they already know that, but sometimes they don't. So I think it's really important to know that even if you're being investigated, you still have rights, and you definitely can very much hold them accountable. I'm not saying the investigation is going to go away. Maybe they got to start over and dot their I's and cross their T's, but at least then you know that it's all above board. And hopefully that means you get a more fair investigation and hopefully a fair outcome.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I think back to, typically, for folks that don't know, if you're going to be called in, maybe there's a question that you may have done something wrong, you violated policy. Typically, for most departments, they have an IA, internal affairs department, that you're going to be called into. And this is 100% my thoughts, it's speculation, but when you think about and you see how law enforcement works, for a person to go into IA, they don't have any specialized training for the most part, right? I mean, it's a role they go into. They're an everyday person. It's not like, they've gone to school like a doctor would for years upon years, or a lawyer like yourself. It's a normal officer. And my belief was always, like you talked about, how there may be a requirement that they show you the body-worn camera before they ask you questions about it. I guarantee you that half of these IA folks don't even know that rule or law exists.
Right. I agree. The smaller the agency, the more likely that there's hardly any policies.
Exactly. And it becomes a cat and mouse at that point too. And I think that's what a lot of law enforcement officers need to understand is, once you go in there, just like you have a job to go after evil as an LEO, and it's cat chases a mouse, right? It's, I'm going to win. I'm going to get this person. That's exactly the mentality that I've always seen IA have, where you're now the mouse. And so, I mean, they definitely don't know. I wish I would have known, half of that when I was in law enforcement, to be honest with you. I've also seen, though, interested to get your thought here, where there's this culture in law enforcement where you handle it internally. You don't air it out. You protect the department. How much does the culture cost officers, and how do you push back against it without torching your career?
Well, I think that very much is a lawyer answer. I think that very much depends on what the issue is. On the 50,000 foot view, grander scale, is that I'll say we because I did it, that we are a profession where you have the legal right to murder someone, kidnap someone, false imprisonment. You're taking away their constitutional rights. And those are, as you know, our country's not perfect, but those are very strong rights. And you have on a daily basis, just the fact that you're able to pull somebody over at a traffic stop, force them to stop, force them to get out of their car, and you're detaining them. Like, citizens can't do that. And if you attempt to do that, they're violating all kind of laws doing that. And so we want there to be a high level of scrutiny on all of that. You want there to be a lot of transparency, because none of us, even and especially cops, we don't want anybody doing the wrong things. You make it harder for all of us. When you have a bad cop, it makes the job of being a cop more dangerous. So we want all those things to be legit and above board and by the law. And so from the handling things in house, like if what you're saying is that somebody's violating the Constitution, then or violating somebody's constitutional rights, meaning like you shouldn't have shot that person, you shouldn't have fought with, whatever it is, you shouldn't have gone onto that property without a warrant, whatever. We want that to be discoverable and come to light. And again, I think that also is with look in the mirror. Like, why does it bother you that this is coming to light? Are you afraid it will hurt your reputation? Well, ultimately, you're improving the reputation of all law enforcement. So again, it'll be hard. I don't care. You'll get through it. The storm will pass. All those things. The other thing is, like, if you've made a mistake, I say this all the time. Like, I go speak at conferences and I'll say in the room, like, raise your hand if you've never made a mistake at work. And like, nobody can raise a hand. You're going to make a mistake. Like, the worst thing you can do is try and prevent people from finding out you made that mistake. Or when it comes to light and they're investigating you, and not be completely truthful about that. The other things, two other things I'll tell people about when they're being investigated is one, so maybe the fourth, and these are not in hierarchy. Do not talk too much. Let them answer the question. It's the investigator's job to be a good investigator and ask the right questions. But think about what they're asking you and then answer that question. And you might be thinking, well, this, I know what they're asking me is this. So, but don't tell them. And I'm not saying you're withholding information. You're saying it's all recorded. Like, well, why didn't you say so-and-so? Like, well, that's not what he asked me. Like, well, you know what he was asking, but that's not what he asked me. And we're not in the business of, well, I thought this guy meant to commit murder, so I just decided to arrest him for it. That's not what we do. We have to prove you committed murder. So you got to answer the question being asked, and then do not fill the silence with talk. I mean, some of the best investigators I ever met, my sergeant in narcotics was a fantastic interviewer, because he would ask a question and he would just sit there and see what happened. And then people would answer. And then, the true guilty ones just start blah, 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 blah. And anyway, so it comes back to this of, they want to keep it internal. They want to keep it in-house. We solve our own problems. But at the end of the day, you have a life to live. And if you keep ignoring these problems over and over and over again, the only person that's hurting, it hurts your community, it hurts your department, it hurts everybody else around you, because that's the culture that you live in. And whether you know it or not, everybody knows it. Everybody knows it. Then the other part is, it will start to eat away at you. And it is like the job is already taking things from you. You're not the same person coming out of law enforcement as you were going in. So why would you make it worse? And so you must stand up for yourself. You must point things out. And then if you're saying, but this is going to hurt my job in the long run, I quit. I left the profession that I thought I would be in my entire professional life. I felt like I was rudderless for 14 years after that. Yes, I went to law school. Yes, I got a job, but I wasn't on a course. I didn't feel like, choice. Law school, whatever. Obviously that's a choice, because you don't just skate through law school. And if you know anybody that says they skated through law school, I don't want to know them. That's like saying my newborn slept through the night on day 2. Like, I don't want to know you. Anyway, and again, I'll say, like, I care if it affects your profession, if your specific assignment, I care. But I don't care in the sense that it's not a reason to prevent reporting it or saying something about it. For 2 reasons. One, for you, and I've just talked about these, but to recap, one, for you, first and foremost for you, because I promise you, I see it all the time. It will affect you. I guarantee you it's affecting your loved ones, your wife, your family, the longer you endure it. And then second is, your department will not get better if you say nothing, period. So then what's the point? So 2 very important reasons to do something about it, even at risk of, I didn't want to leave SWAT. I just wanted them to, even at risk of losing your assignment or your profession or negatively affecting your career. I didn't want to leave SWAT. I just wanted to be valued as a SWAT operator. At the end of the day, I don't know if that ever would have happened. And granted, that's very specific to my situation of being a female. And I left anyway. I quit. I walked away from it all. So I should have reported it. I should have said, this can't happen. You guys got to stop. I should have allowed for opportunities to redirect, train, and correct. And instead, I just suffered, and it took me 13 years to get over it.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing. I go so far to the extent I even tell my own daughter this, but I used to tell other law enforcement officers this, and I still do actually to some I talk to. If you're called in, you don't say a word. I go to the extent of, you make sure that your lawyer is there, because you don't say a word. And I'm very adamant about that. But I also really agree with what you just said as well. So every month I set aside some time to, I don't even know what the right word is, to just talk to law enforcement or military folks that are coming out or that want out. Because I look back to when I was in, and mirrors your story almost to a T, only I didn't become a lawyer. I didn't think, my only thing that I was good at was being an operator, shooting a gun, doing that type of work, which really don't translate outside of military or law enforcement. And I work and talk to a lot of law enforcement officers to this day. I just helped one come out. He was one of the SWAT team leaders for a local team, and he got out, and he's now the director of physical security for a major corporate company. But they feel like, I don't have any other option. This is it. Mm-hmm. But you do. I never in a million years, when I got out, I never thought I'd go to MIT. I never thought I'd become an engineer. You never thought that you'd be where you are today, and look at you. I mean, you're crushing it. And so there's options for anybody listening where you feel like you're kind of stuck.
Mm-hmm. I mean, like you, like me, is that the choice? Would I have chosen that in the moment? No. But do I think that was what was supposed to happen for me? Yes, now, because I know that I provide a service and fill a gap that law enforcement and first responders desperately need when they need it. And there's always other options. And I have a lot of clients that come out of law enforcement and don't go back in. Sometimes that's because the mental toll that the job has taken on them, and particularly what their department did to them, has been so severe that I don't think you should go back. And I've said, look, I through different conversations, it comes out okay, what do you want out of this? Where are you going to go? And I don't think it should be law enforcement. And I've had clients that have contemplated or attempted suicide, because you get to the point where, and that's why I say it's so important that you stand up for yourself and say something, because you give so much of yourself to the job. And then at whatever point, and I've talked with 30-year veterans who are crying, men and women, majority of men, who are crying on the phone with me, or their wives get on the phone and they're crying with me because what they've all endured is that they start to it meant nothing. What my value means nothing. I mean nothing. And that's a very dangerous place to be. And you absolutely have value. I mean, I partner with people, I refer people and partner with others who they specialize in helping law enforcement transition or lateral out or lateral to other law enforcement things. But they always think, well, I don't have any value. All I know how to do, like you say, I just carry a gun, or all I know how to do is shoot. Well, I don't believe that for a second. And the longer you've been in law enforcement, you have learned a lot of skills, and you do have a lot of certifications. And a lot of that does transition out in the civilian world, or lends itself to a lot of credibility if you're wanting to move on to something else completely. Of course, my resume in law school looked different because I became a cop. And, not saying, I didn't go to Harvard by any means. But I think all of that matters as you are building your resume. And I tell a lot of people, and refer some of my own clients out, is spend a little bit of money or time with somebody who specializes in your resume. I mean, certainly I could help a little bit, but I mean, I'm also too busy helping with legal things. But I can certainly direct and point to others. That's all that they do is help law enforcement transition, out of law enforcement or within to different jobs or big promotions or whatever. Because cops generally are not good at promoting themselves. In their LinkedIn profile, and you think, oh, who needs a LinkedIn profile? Well, that depends on what you want to do and where you want to go, and that stuff can really matter. And your LinkedIn profile is just another version of a resume. And so, so there's certainly, I don't believe you at all that you have no value. I don't believe you at all if you say that I don't have anything, I don't know what to do outside of law enforcement, I don't have any skills. I don't believe you. And I think, it's just, let's shift that lens you're looking through. And certainly, I said it at the beginning is, I don't know, but I'll figure it out. And there is a way to figure it out. It just, it might take you a while to get there. But, first and foremost is that everybody has value. The work that you've done has been important, and maybe it went way south and you hate it and you want to leave, but that doesn't mean it doesn't have value either in the past or in your future.
Absolutely. I mean, I tell people exactly what you just said. And if you think about it, obviously I have hindsight now that I'm out, but if you think back, for anybody that has that thought right now, what you do, even if it's a person that you interact with, if you go in and you're part of a human and sex trafficking takedown, or you perform CPR and you save a woman who just overdosed, the direct and indirect thing that you did there, even if there was a child, like I think back and, there was a child where my partner did CPR and a 13-year-old kid had to watch us do that, but my partner saved his mom. Mm-hmm. That's a big impact. I mean, you're making a very big impact and you don't realize it, but you really are. It's remarkable. And I think it comes down to, like, I remember when I was in, there was the word, articulate. Articulation was a big word. I'm sure it still is. But that's what I tell LEO today is you need to, if you articulate, if you're on the SWAT team, if you're a SWAT team operator, a leader, that equally transfers to a crisis management, resiliency, risk, enterprise level job where you can go from making 50,000 to making 250,000 a year. Like there's opportunity there. I promise.
I mean, even for me, was I the SWAT operator? No, but I was also the person that I could tell you exactly how much equipment we had, where we stored it, how we stored it. I didn't order it, but certainly could have gotten into that. So certainly from a logistical end of what it takes, training hours, who did what and when, and all that stuff really matters in that world where, in trial and criminal trial and what was somebody's qualifications and all that kind of stuff. And documentation matters. And so even for what I did, if that's something I would have thought about at the time, is I could have transitioned in that way of, like from a logistical and operational administrative standpoint of an operational team, that's an important role and is also not a skill. Like, you can be a good quarterback, but not a good coach. There's people on the sidelines that make the team run well. And not that I necessarily wanted to be on the sidelines person, but I think there's also another way to say, like, is it really sidelines? It's an integral part of the team to make sure that, training hours and what do you want to do? And then looking at, over the year, what did we miss? What should we do? And from a planning standpoint. So, and even things like that help reduce liability later. Because if I can say, nope, here's all the records and here's how thorough we were and here's how we plan it. And they're like, okay, then you guys are good. Never mind. And so absolutely, there's, it's certainly not something I considered at the time. I just considered it, I thought it was just a failure of an experience. And honestly, I didn't even want to tell people I did it for years. I didn't want to tell people I did narcotics. I didn't want to tell people I did SWAT. I've taken 4 bar exams. I've sat for 4 and passed all 4. And even there was a phase where, because I hated the law firm life, I didn't want people to know that. People were like, oh, that's amazing. And I would think, no, it's not. Like, what has it done? Like, it doesn't mean anything. And then I kind of got over myself and realized my therapist was like, that's your story. And I was like, what? What does that even mean? She's like, that's your story. And you're the only one telling it. She's like, nobody else is telling that story about you. Anyway, so like, and I'm a plug therapy because my therapist helped me realize that I was writing those stories and that's not how anybody else saw my story. And again, I don't need other people's validation, and also had to realize, like, yes, there's value in all of those things, and how can I put that, how can I capture that for myself to, and that's ultimately like, well, I hate the law firm life. And what do you want to be doing? Like, I don't know, something, I don't want to be a cop again, but something with cops. And ultimately of getting over myself and realizing, oh, I can help. And those experiences that I went through are very valuable and the help that I know I can provide. And so, yeah, it's,
Yeah.
the hard sucks, but the hard is beneficial.
I want to pivot into one final question in this section. I try to keep these episodes around an hour. So I know we're about there. So we, as an organization, the Find Me Project, we help search for missing people who have been missing or kidnapped. We do that through intelligence or by performing search and recovery operations. So, we will go out and do land or water-based searches. I have a sonar and dive boat. We'll go out and do that type of stuff. We do not investigate. We're intelligence. Work with a lot of amazing folks that volunteer on our team, people like you with your background. But one of the biggest things that we see is that families tell us that they feel like law enforcement does not take them serious from the very beginning. We have families, for example, where their 25-year-old daughter has gone missing. They reach out to us. We start to do it. And out of courtesy, we'll reach out to the law enforcement agency to make sure, A, that there's an active missing person. And we don't want to step on toes, right? Again, we're intelligence. Before we go out and deploy our resources to search, we need to do our due diligence. Mm-hmm. And this probably won't surprise you. I'm not going to name any names, but we have many, many law enforcement agencies where the detective will say, yeah, look, there is an active case, but I want to tell you this. She was on a drug-fueled bender. She was high for 3 days. She's a drug addict. She's a prostitute. And the tone that you can see right away is they've already dismissed it. They've already, that case is already not going to be solved by that department. So, with your background in law enforcement and law, what do you think that we can do to change that?
I think it comes back to making sure that the officers you in the department, when I say, so like top down, like that your officers and deputies, whatever, in your department are doing the work to make sure that their job is not turning them into a cynical, diamond-hearted, piece of coal curmudgeon. Because you just see the same stuff over and over and over again. I mean, domestic violence victim, you first go out and you're new and, oh my gosh, this breaks my heart. You got hurt. I want to help you. I want to make this stop. And then you get another call. He beats her up again. Another call. He beats her up again. And you get to the point of thinking, well, why am I helping you? Like, I'm just going to not help you anymore. I'm not going to show up and then help you, arrest this guy. And you're going to want to fight me because I arrested him. And nothing that happened. I had a girl go ballistic in the back of my car when I was just trying to keep her safe. And then she heard over the radio that we found the guy and we're arresting him. And she just went ballistic. And anyway, it's like you can't just brush your teeth once and expect your teeth to be clean for the rest of be healthy for the rest of your life. Mental health and the steps and actions you need to take to be mentally well in this profession are daily 1% better all the time activities that require constant work and effort. It requires more than just your check the box training each year. It requires your supervisors to actually sit down and think about, okay, how's everybody's performance going? Do I have anybody who's starting to check out? Do I have anybody who's starting to be more crass, cuss more, treat people worse? And really look at that and then have a report, whether maybe you don't put it on the supervisor to go tell that person, maybe it's just a reporting system. And then you have like somebody else where they called in and say, look, this is what we're seeing. But it requires proactive effort on the officer's point, from the officer, from the department. And it's not just these checkbox means nothing type of trainings each year where the guys come in and know it's a joke, but they just have to check it for their like Texas, it's like your TCOL certifications. It requires a lot of effort. And again, it comes back to it's the hard work. You got to do the hard work. You got to do the work. And I know that that's difficult in a profession like law enforcement, where you have so many other things to think about and worry about. And, was that excessive use of force? Did you pull the trigger when you shouldn't have? Are you having a riot in your community? I mean, I live in Houston, where there was an ICE shooting a couple weeks ago, and there's been, not necessarily riots, but protests about all of that. And there's a lot of things going on and significant safety issues in law enforcement and all of that. And then the agency is constantly worrying about CYA. So there's definitely a conflict of interest between what the agency's thinking of in terms of protecting themselves versus are they really looking out for their officers? And so obviously I'm saying a lot of things. And so it's definitely not a simple issue. I think it's a complex issue. I definitely think there's ways to address it and train people and have systems in place so that they have the checks and balances. Because ultimately, what I think you're describing is somebody who's just become too hardened over time. And what I mean is, here's an example. Are they taking all of their days off? They should be taking all of their days off. If you're in a department where you can't allow people to take off because you're so understaffed, like that's one of your biggest things you should be fixing, because you should be forcing people to take off. You want them to not be working every day. You want them to, engage in activities that have nothing to do with law enforcement. It's the abundance mentality versus scarcity mentality. I've studied 7 Habits of Highly Effective People at different decades of my life because it resonates with me differently each time. But it's making sure that your officers are getting away from and almost reconnecting with humanity in a sense. It's like you go out, you go sit in PTA and you think the silly stuff I might hear other people complaining about, but that's their reality. But so is my reality, and that's their reality. But my point is that your reality can change and it can shift, and it can also become a very bad place. And so when I see what you're saying is, don't go then destroy that officer. And maybe they do need to be reprimanded, but what I would rather call it is counseling and redirection. Because you do need to hold them accountable. You can't do that. But why is this happening? Like, if I'm getting a headache every single day and I've got to take ibuprofen every single day, and the ibuprofen works, but why am I getting the headache every day? And I exercise regularly, sleep, eat good, 80-20 rule. I go to the chiropractor regularly, not necessarily because I'm hurting, because I know that if I go, I won't hurt. And but I've learned that the hard way. So I really look at that as an opportunity to invest in your staff so that you can encourage them to improve their lives so that they are engaging and recognizing like the positive aspects of humanity and not just all the shit that they see all the time. And also very hard because people hate cops most of the time. And you want to be able to then like check back in with reality. And I know it's hard, and I'm not suggesting that anything I'm saying is easy to do, but that's what I hear when you say that about the officers who don't care. I just think they're in a bad place, and we should look at trying to help fix it.
Yeah, powerful advice. So no doubt we're going to have first responders, law enforcement officers that are going to listen, watch this. If they want to learn more about what you have going on, maybe they want to work with you or just see your content, where can they go and find more about you?
Well, you can find all of that on my website, ladylawshield.com. If you need our help as an attorney legally, then you can book a call with us. You want to follow along on social media, the links are there. I encourage everybody to sign up for the newsletter where we give tips and examples of things once a month. We don't overwhelm people. I do share links like these great interviews in those newsletters. So if you want to see where else we've done that, and I do speak in person different places. I have a couple conferences in September, one in San Diego, one in Vegas, the Wounded Blue at the end of September. So, follow along. I encourage you to sign up so you can get that information, because my goal is just like the way you train with your like firearms regularly, so that when the poop hits the fan, you know what to do without thinking about it. I encourage you to sign up for the newsletter or follow on social media so that we can give these tips regularly, because I want that to be planted in your brain so that when and if something happens to you, you know what to do right away, you know how to take care of yourself, and that you do actually take care of yourself. So ladylawshield.com, I encourage you to follow along in all the ways so that if you need our help, where you know where to find it.
We'll be sure to put that in the link to the show notes and anywhere else this conversation is shared. Bridget, I can't say thank you enough. I think this is going to be one of the more powerful episodes. It's going to resonate with a lot of folks.